Welcome to Film and Page. I'm Dominic. When it comes to science fiction franchises, one of my favorites is Star Trek. Through better or worse, I've always been a fan of Star Trek. And one of the things I've always loved about Star Trek is their starship designs. For me, Star Trek overall has the best starship designs in science fiction. So in this video, I've decided to rank the hero ships of Star Trek. What I mean by hero ships is the vessel the cast of heroes find themselves on each week. For example, the Enterprise D is the main hero ship for Star Trek The Next Generation. This ranking will be from worst to the best. Also, this ranking is just my own personal opinion. Now let's get into it. Starting things off at the bottom of the barrel is the U.S.S. Cerritos from Star Trek Lower Decks. I can't stand this design. It looks awkward and stupid. Now I know, Lower Decks is a comedy, and the ship is designed to look dumb on purpose. So if that is what they were going for, they succeeded. However, with that said, it doesn't change the fact that I don't like the design of the ship. Now, to be fair, there are Starfleet ships that I think are worse than this design, but they're not hero ships. Why I don't like it is because I don't like the saucer section and how the warp engines hang underneath, along with the placement of the main deflector dish. This ship just doesn't do it for me at all. Now we have the U.S.S. Discovery refit from Star Trek Discovery. One of the few things I liked about Discovery was the ship itself, the Crossfield class. Then even that was taken away and replaced with this refit version, which I think ruins the design. I hate all the extra lighting strips over the ship and the look of the main deflector dish. But what really ruins it, and this is the final nail in the coffin for this one, is the floating warp nacelles. I can't stand it. I think it looks absolutely stupid. Next up is the La Sirena from Star Trek Picard. Now, my problem with this one is that it feels very generic, like it would work as an Alien of the Week ship, but not as a hero ship. Also, it seems like they were a little too inspired by the Rocinante from The Expanse, with Spanish-sounding names for the ships, and even similar size and color scheme. Then we have the USS Enterprise A from Star Trek Beyond. We don't get to see much of this ship in Beyond, just a quick glimpse at the end. So at first glance, there may not seem to be any difference between this ship and the one that preceded it. But there are some. Most notable, the warp nacelles have changed. They somehow managed to make them look uglier than the last ship, which is enough to push it down the rankings below its predecessor. Other than that, my complaints with the Kelvin Timeline Enterprise A are the same as the Kelvin Enterprise. Which brings us on to the USS Enterprise from Star Trek 09. When I first heard they were making a prequel movie to the original series, one of the things I was most excited to see was how the Enterprise would look. When they finally released the first images of what the ship would look like, I was very disappointed. I can't stand the warp nacelles, they look too big. Also, how the neck of the ship sweeps into the back of the secondary hull similar to the Enterprise D in TNG, but combined with the motion picture refit saucer section. Also, the main deflector dish doesn't work for me at all. It's like they took elements from all these past versions of the Enterprise and put them together to create a Frankenstein monstrosity. Now, don't get me wrong, I like Star Trek 09 as a movie. I've watched it many times over the years, and I know the movie has its problems, with many Trek fans not liking the film. I, however, really like Star Trek 09. I just think the Kelvin Timeline Enterprise looks like dog shit. Now we are out of the section of ships I hate, and the next couple of ships are ones I'm lukewarm on. I don't love them, but don't hate them either. I think they're just okay. Starting with the USS Protostar from Star Trek Prodigy. Now this isn't a bad ship design, but I find it somewhat generic looking. It's like an updated version of the USS Voyager. Now, I've only seen a couple of episodes of Prodigy, so this ship might grow on me over time and move up the ranks. Next we have the USS Voyager from Star Trek Voyager. This is a ship that I have flipped on over the years. When I first saw it, I thought it looked really cool and advanced. Also, I like that they went smaller for the design, where the Enterprise D was a huge ship. Voyager wasn't much bigger than a Constitution class. However, over the years, as I watched and rewatched Voyager, the design started to grow off on me. I got tired of how Starfleet ships were going away from that tall ship design by eliminating the neck and directly connecting the secondary and primary hulls. Voyager started to remind me more and more of a garden spade. Also, I really don't care for the main deflector dish. Still, however, not a bad design for a hero ship, despite the few gripes I have with it. Now, from here on out, I really like and love the rest of the designs on this list. Which brings us to Enterprise, from Star Trek Enterprise. What I said earlier about how Voyager grew off of me the more I looked at it, it is the opposite with the NX-01. I hated the ship when I first saw it. I found it looked too advanced for the time period it took place in. I was hoping it would look more like a Daedalus class, with a sphere instead of a saucer section. Something to make it a little less sleek and more backwards. Later I found out that the original designs for the NX-01 was to be much closer to a Daedalus class ship, having a sphere instead of a saucer section, but Rick Berman axed the idea, demanding it must be a saucer. However, having rewatched all of Enterprise a few years back, and having gotten over my grievances with the show, I really grew to like the design of the NX-01. Its function and interiors are very well thought out. Moving on to the U.S.S. Defiant from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Now this is a ship that was a game changer for me. When this thing made its first appearance on DS9, I loved it. My first thought was, this is the Federation's equivalent of a Klingon bird of prey. It's small, sleek, maneuverable, and packs a lot of firepower, with its pulse phasers and quantum torpedoes and cloaking device. Where in the past the Federation never had a ship like that. They had the big Galaxy-class explorer ships and the smaller science vessels like the Oberth class, but nothing that was a proper warship or gunship, which reflected the exploratory and peaceful nature of the Federation, until threats like the Borg and the Dominion forced them to design ships like the Defiant. I thought the design was fresh and badass, looking different from anything seen in the Federation at that point. I loved the design, and still do to this day. Deep Space Nine was so much better for having the addition of this ship. Infinitely cooler than those crappy little runabouts they had to use. The U.S.S. Enterprise E from Star Trek First Contact. When the Enterprise D was destroyed in Star Trek Generations, I knew we would be seeing a brand new Enterprise in the next film. I wasn't disappointed in the new Enterprise. It looks advanced and sleek, much more streamlined and smaller than the Enterprise D, having 24 to 26 decks where the Enterprise D had 42 decks. Also, what I loved about the new ship is that it looks more ominous and menacing. Its design fits the mood of the film and reflects the shift in Starfleet thinking when it comes to its ships, moving in a much more military direction as a result of the Borg and Dominion War. As cool and as sleek as it was, it always lacked the character that the Enterprise D had. The Enterprise D felt like home, where the Enterprise E never did. Still, however, I do love this ship. Now we move on to my top 5 of this list. And in the number 5 slot is the U.S.S. Discovery from Star Trek Discovery. This is the opposite of the Kelvin Timeline Enterprise, where I hate the ship but love the film. In this case, I love the ship and hate the show. When Star Trek Discovery was first announced, I was really excited by the news. When the first images of what the ship would look like was released, I loved the design. I also recognized the design right away. It was heavily based on the concept artwork done by artist Ralph McQuarrie of the Enterprise for a proposed Star Trek film in the mid-70s called Star Trek Planet of the Titans. It was a starship design I always had a soft spot for. Also, with Discovery being a prequel series, the retro look worked. When you look at the old McQuarrie design, you can easily see concepts that would go on to heavily influence the look of the ships in Star Wars, with the secondary hull having a triangle shape instead of the smooth curves of the Matt Jeffries design, it being one of the defining features that was ported over to the U.S.S. Discovery. That is why I love this ship. I only wish I could have loved the show just as much. Next we have the U.S.S. Enterprise from Star Trek Strange New Worlds. When Star Trek 09 was first announced, and I imagined what the Enterprise was going to look like, this ship right here is pretty much what I had pictured in my head. I knew they were not going to duplicate the Enterprise look from the original series exactly, but I was expecting them to get a lot closer than what they did. When it comes to taking that original design and giving it a modern facelift, I think this design for Strange New Worlds nails it. This is how the Enterprise should have looked in the Kelvin Timeline films, even though it is an updated design. When I watch Strange New Worlds, I'm always picking out details on the ship that are the same as the TOS Enterprise, and I just love that. As far as modern Trek goes, beginning with Star Trek '09 up to the current shows like Strange New Worlds, Discovery, and Picard, Strange New Worlds Enterprise is hands down my favorite ship design. And the only real couple of nitpicks I have with it is the row of 6 lights or windows at the top of the saucer section, and the width of the struts, I guess they're called, that attach the warp nacelles to the secondary hull. I find they are a touch too wide, and I don't care for the cutouts. It's a fantastic design that is 75% true to the original, with a 25% update. Now let's move on. The USS Enterprise D from Star Trek The Next Generation. When I first saw this ship as a kid, it blew me away. It was a game changer. You see, these days, Star Trek has a huge amount of on-screen ships. However, back then, before TNG aired, the amount of ships that were a part of Starfleet were very limited compared to today's standards. You had the TOS Enterprise, the Refit Enterprise, the Reliant, the Excelsior, and Oberth-class science ship. That was about it for on-screen ships. So when TNG aired and we got a brand new Enterprise, it was really exciting. The Enterprise D looked huge, advanced, and powerful. The look of this ship is instantly recognizable, and it's iconic. I love how it looks massive with all the windows. Also, how all the different parts of the ship all curve and sweep into each other. It takes the foundation set by Matt Jeffries and brings it to the next level in a beautiful way. The Enterprise D became the flagship that brought us into a whole new era of Star Trek. Now, in the number 2 spot is the U.S.S. Enterprise from Star Trek. Now, I've seen a lot of fans of Star Trek crap on this one, saying it looks too much like a model, and it's too low on detail, which I disagree. This design was years ahead of its time, and only held back by the limitations of the special effects of its day. If you made a new CGI model of this ship so it looked like it was constructed of space-age material instead of wood, like the original model, you would need very few tweaks, and this ship design would totally work in a modern Trek show. Also, to really appreciate how groundbreaking this design was for the day, you have to go back and see what was being done in sci-fi movies and shows around the same time. Ship design was like an afterthought. Everything was either a rocket or flying saucer/UFO. 2 classic science fiction films that I own on DVD is Forbidden Planet and The Day the Earth Stood Still. 2 good movies, but you could take the spaceship from one and swap it with the other and no one would notice. So when Gene Roddenberry approached Matt Jeffries to design the original Enterprise, he had 2 stipulations. He didn't want anything that looked like a rocket or flying saucer. What he came back with was brilliant, a design that looked different from everything else around it, was well thought out in how it functioned so the parts make sense, and would be the basis for every other ship on this list. I love this design. It's what got me into Star Trek. It's classic and timeless. And finally, number 1, the USS Enterprise Refit/A from Star Trek the Motion Picture and The Voyage Home. Now, it was a really hard choice, and I gave it a lot of thought as to which ship would be number 1, the TOS Enterprise or the Motion Picture Refit. The Refit just edges it out for a few reasons. Richard Taylor and Andrew Probert would take what Matt Jeffries established and evolve it to perfection. I find the pearl white and glowing blue deflector dish works so much better for a hero ship. Also, as groundbreaking as the TOS Enterprise was, I was never really clear on where the phasers and torpedoes were shot from. They both seemed to emanate from some mystery spot at the bottom of the saucer section. The Refit Enterprise solves this problem by putting the torpedo launchers on the neck of the ship and placing phaser ball turrets on the bottom and top of the saucer section. Also, having the torpedo launchers on the neck of the ship gives that part of the ship a more functional look than just a connection point between the primary and secondary hulls. It also looks way cooler as well. I also love the redesigned warp nacelles. They give the ship a more sleek aerodynamic look. I also love how the ship lights itself. Also, what really put this ship design ahead in my mind is I recently watched the new 4K upscaled version of Star Trek the Motion Picture. The ship looks absolutely fantastic in 4K. I watched it right before bed, and the first thing I watched when I woke up was the first episode of Strange New Worlds. Now let me tell you, the contrast was stark. The refit Enterprise at 4K made the Strange New Worlds Enterprise look like shit. That was the deciding factor for me that pushed it to the #1 spot. That is why it is my #1 hero ship. Not only that, it is my favorite starship in all of Trek. I'll take that even one step further. Not only is it my favorite ship in all of Star Trek, but in all of science fiction. So that is my ranking of the hero ships of Star Trek. I'd be curious to see how others would rank these ships, and how it would differ from mine. So that's everything I have to say in this video. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and I will see you at the next one. I'd like to say thank you to all of my subscribers. I appreciate you all in helping this channel grow. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to hit the bell icon so you'll be notified when new videos are uploaded.